Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 58, and we are reading chapters 8 through 11 of Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. We're getting well on our way into part 1 of Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. We're a couple chapters in, and I just want to kind of get a general feedback of you guys. Is it living up to the hype that we've built over our long break? Going back into Oathbringer here, we didn't jump straight into it after Words of Radiance. We took a hiatus. So how are we feeling now that we're getting into part 1 actually now? Start with you, Elliot.
I think the flashback chapters for Dalinar have given it sort of a tense feel to the start. Like I feel like I haven't been able to relax at all. I'm kind of on edge almost through these first dozen or so chapters of the book. So it's been good. It's been good. We're learning a lot right off the bat, which is exciting. But um, I don't know. It's not quite what I expected so far.
Just a quick question before we jump to Paul. Are you scared for your favorite character yet?
I am terrified for my favorite character.
All right. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And contrary to Elliot's fear, I have full confidence that Dalinar's going to be all right because we haven't seen the main character really die yet. So
That's not what he's afraid of.
Yeah, I know, but he'll be okay. That's what I mean.
I hope
he'll be all right. He'll be all right. He always finds a way,
All right, can I get two words to summarize this episode, chapters 8 through 11 of Oathbringer? We'll start with you, Elliot.
My 2 words for this set of chapters are purpose and innocence.
Purpose and innocence. All right. You've definitely used innocence before. But there's nothing wrong with that. It triggered a memory of you using it for Syl. But go ahead.
Amateur.
Go ahead, Paul.
So for my 2 words this week, I have ironic and eerie.
Okay. Ironic and eerie, and innocence and purpose?
Purpose.
Okay. Let's use these 4 words and talk about Oathbringer. All right, let's talk about purpose first, Elliot, and then you can jump into innocence after that.
Yeah, there's a couple characters in these sections dealing with, or at least we as a reader are learning about their purpose perhaps or lack thereof in where they're at right now. I think the first would probably be Adolin. I think Adolin's struggling a little bit to figure out kind of what's next now that he's killed Sadeas. He gets put in charge of investigating a copycat murder who's copycatting him. And we learn that the death of his Rashadium horse is weighing pretty heavily on him. So he's struggling here in these chapters, and you can see it, struggling with, what's he supposed to be doing. Renarin seems to be struggling a little bit in these chapters. He has kind of a comment where he said he was starting to feel like he was fitting in with Bridge 4, and then all of a sudden that got kind of ripped away from him now that he's a Knights Radiant, so struggling there. And then Dalinar in the flashback seems to be kind of a man without a purpose. He's a juggernaut, he's a berserker, he's a beast, but even he doesn't really care like what he's doing. He's just, put an enemy in front of me and I'll bash him down kind of thing. So a couple characters struggling with their purpose. Flashback Dalinar doesn't really have one. And then jumping over to innocence, a little simpler here on this one. I did it simply for the slightly terrifying scene at the very end of chapter 11, where we see a very innocent young boy get berserkered by our flashback main character, and that was stark.
Yeah. Paul?
So I think your words are great, by the way. Elliot. I really liked purpose and stuff. My two words are ironic and eerie. For ironic, it's mostly because I don't. It's pretty self-telling. I feel like there's a good amount of irony throughout these chapters. Um, with with Adolin and the investigation going on, and then also with Renarin, there's a bit. I think it's a bit ironic because he has this really cool, elaborate looking shard blade now, which is just really cool, and he doesn't really like want it, or he's like worried about it, and it's just I think it's kind of ironic and funny. Um, but also kind of emotional, I guess. I don't. There's a lot to kind of unpack there, but it's really cool. But that's why I chose ironic as a word for these. And then eerie, I will talk more about later. It has a little bit with some Dalinar flashbacks, and stuff like that. But I'll kind of get more into eerie later. So.
Sounds good. We have our first Shalon point of view chapters, and I thought it was interesting that neither one of you mentioned that at all in your four words.
Whoops.
Oopsies. But Shalon had her book, so we don't really care anymore. No, that's not true. That's not true.
Aaron and Kaladin are behind us.
Yeah, exactly. We can go ahead and start talking about chapter 8 if you'd like. We pick up with Shalon. This is her first appearance in this book, and she is not in a good state at the moment. She's drawing furiously to try to block Pattern out of her mind, because her truth at the end of Words of Radiance was, I killed my mother, with Pattern as a shard blade. So there's a couple references to her immediately trying to shove that thought down, and it won't go like it normally does, because she's spoken as a truth, and so she has to confront it now, and it's her natural reaction to try to push it away, and it won't go. So what are your guys' thoughts on Shalon as we enter Oathbringer here?
Yeah, she's definitely struggling. I probably could have included her in my word for purpose. Actually, she's come a long way from the Shalon that we first met, but she still seems to be a little bit struggling with, what do I do? Am I ready to take on being a knight radiant and the leadership and all that comes with that? So yeah, I agree with you, Trevor. She's not in the worst place maybe that we've seen Shalon in, but she's not doing super great either.
Yeah, she's definitely in a rough patch, and just kind of like the thing she's choosing to withhold and the way she's kind of handling all the stuff she's going through is, I wouldn't say it's like a big surprise. It's a little shocking, because I feel like throughout Words of Radiance we really got a lot of hope for Shalon with everything, us like learning about her past and seeing how she's grown from that. I feel like there's a lot of hope that this would kind of be like a good, healthy little progression, and we're starting to not see that, which is kind of sad. It's honestly, it's not the ideal start we wanted to Shalon in this book, but I do have a lot of hope still. I think that's kind of a lot of Shalon's character, is coming out of these really difficult situations and these these tough like mental and emotional spots.
And one of the things she's struggling with in the beginning of this chapter is she's trying to sketch the tower, like the tower itself of Urithiru, and it's like she can't. That the way it's described is a little odd. I honestly couldn't decide whether I thought it was Shalon's mental block, like she isn't able to channel her artistic talent so well to draw it, or is this like something a little more magical? Does the tower like have some sort of power to where it can't be sketched, where it can't be defined? You know, the way that like Dalinar cannot hear his old wife's name. Can the tower just not be drawn? Like I couldn't figure it out honestly whether this was just a Shalon thing or if this is a more mystical thing.
Maybe it has a protection against like Knight's radiant powers and light weaving powers, because Shalon's had, in our experience with Shalon's powers, her light weaving is directly tied to her sketching. Like her light weaving is way more potent if she sketches it first. So she's having issues depicting it on her page.
That's kind of where I was thinking along with that. And yeah, I honestly can't tell if this is what this actually is, but yeah, what if there's another, surge ability out there where they could, damage things if they can, draw a sketch of it first and then, poke a hole in it and it, the tower crumbles or the tower has some sort of protection against that or something like that. But oh, maybe not. Maybe there's just Shalon getting inside her own head and I don't know.
At least from my perspective, I only did get to read this chapter once. So not super deep or anything, but my understanding of this chapter was that it's just kind of a result of Shalon being in a difficult spot at the moment. But it could very well be the other
Could
way
be.
too. So
We have two Shalon point of view chapters back to back, and I feel like she doesn't spotlight neither one of them. One of them is
yeah,
one of them is a meeting where they light weave a map of the entire Roshar with Dalinar, and the other one is Sadius's death scene. So both are Shalon point of view, but I feel like neither of them are about Shalon that much, because the scene that we've been talking about so far is only a couple pages, and then it moves on to a bigger meeting. So, what are you guys' thoughts on Shalon and Dalinar combining their powers to make something grander? What are the implications there, and what were your first impressions of that?
I was really excited because I feel like we haven't ever seen any kind of combination of Knight's Radiant powers yet. And that's what I've been looking forward to. I'm looking forward to kind of like an epic battle scene where all the light weavers and I don't know, else callers and whoever are doing their thing and the wind runners is everyone's kind of working together and there's all this like these awesome powers being used. And this isn't that battle scene, but it is a really cool way that we get to kind of see their powers come together. I don't fully understand how or why right now. I don't know if I was supposed to pick that up or not. Um, but kind of a glimpse at stuff.
Potential, yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Paul, that this got me fairly excited. I too am waiting for the scene from like The Incredibles, if you've seen the animated movie where all the different all the different family members come together and all use their powers together to, bring down whatever villain they're fighting. Like that's where we're gotta be going with this, right? Where you're right, the Windrunner and the Light Weaver and the Skybreaker, everybody like comes together to form this awesome, unbeatable team. And this was the first example we've seen of powers coming together, which was super cool. I was trying to figure out too if Renarin somehow was playing into this. We know that his power somehow has to do with like foresight or something like that. Some like looking. I forget what's the name of his order.
Truth
I know
Watcher.
we looked it up. Yeah, so the name I guess, yeah, it kind of implies sort of like a seeing sort of thing as well. So I was thinking maybe Renarin was actually part of this power as well. There's a few mentions of him in this chapter, but it's a little hard to tell if this is just Dalinar and Shalon or if Renarin's in there too. I wasn't sure, but cool stuff. There's there's actually one specific thing that was a mention to Renarin that caught my eye in this chapter. Dalinar mentions the description of Odium's champion that he saw, And Renarin like reacts to this. Dalinar says it, and then everyone else is like, "Oh, that sounds ominous." But Renarin's over there like making a face or something like that, like he's in shock. I forget the exact description, but it kind of made me pause. Like, wait, has Renarin seen that vision before, or like does Renarin know who that is? Renarin has turned into quite the like withdrawn. I don't even know how to say it. Like guy that knows way more than he's putting off kind of character.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden.
Do you remember? Do you remember Dalinar's description or thought of Odium's champion when he sees him in his vision, either last episode or the episode before?
So I'm going off of memory here, but I think he sees a bright light, which I think he's thinking is Odium, like in the background, and then in like the foreground is this dark figure with 9 shadows and red eyes, and that's like all we have so far.
Do you remember what he talks about the red eyes though? It's fine if not. I can.
Well, so there was a part that I did talk about before of like he felt they were familiar somehow.
Yeah. Yes.
And I keyed into that before because that makes me wonder, like, is this champion going to be someone we know, kind of thing? Is that why this is familiar to Dalinar? So
Yep.
yeah, is that what you're going for?
Yep. I just wanted to bring that up again because Dalinar had the distinct impression that he knew he'd seen this person before. So I just wanted to bring that up.
So it's Eshonai confirmed. That's pretty cool.
No, it's Kaladin.
Yeah, true. I have to say, just like a comparison for anyone watching, the way I've been thinking of Renarin lately is almost like a Bran Stark. If you've seen or read Game of Thrones, I feel like it's like the character who kind of sees and knows everything, but he's just not saying anything, and I just really want to know what's on his mind. Is basically how you could summarize that. But yeah, I'm really curious to hear more. We are starting, like, throughout the book, we are starting to get a little more Renarin content. I feel like in a previous book, we started to get a lot more Adolin content as we went along. At first, he was a minor character, right? And I'm hoping Renarin just we get to see more and more of him, because I'm really interested in him, especially now that he's a truth watcher, right? And has a shard blade and everything. I would love to get more perspective from him.
Well, he had 2 for a minute there, and then he gave 1 back to Adolin. So
yeah,
that's true.
So let's talk about the game plan of Dalinar and the Alethi, and kind of what we get out of chapter 8 is they're looking at Roshar and they talk about oath gates. That they're trying to map out where the oath gates are and what the strategic advantage would be if they would start capturing them and they start prioritizing them. So that's their plan right now, is to secure as many oath gates as possible. And right now they have the Shattered Plains, and that's it. So what they're really wanting right now is something on the west side of Roshar. It doesn't really matter which one at this point, but they just want something on the west side of Roshar. So that's going to be their focus moving forward. Is, okay, like, obviously they want Alethkar back. Obviously they want the Yakaved one open, that type of thing. But what would really help their supply lines, if you would, is if they could open up one on the west side of Roshar, and they could hop back and forth and get troops back and forth on top of Roshar, like wherever. So that's going to be their focus moving forward here.
Yep, and it makes total sense, that the obvious strategic advantage of just being able to hop around Roshar wherever you want to and transport, supplies instantly wherever your armies need them. That's a huge advantage over an enemy that seems to have powers, way beyond anything they have with, the red lightning and all that they were wielding on the Shattered Plains. So I think it's a good plan. We'll see if it works.
Sure. One thing I'm actually really curious to get your perspective on, Elliot. Just kind of this whole premise right now that basically the issue at hand is this getting all the oath gates online where they can use them. Um, I feel like it's shaping up to be a relatively dull plot line. The oath gates are really cool and they're very functional, right? But it's not that cool. It feels like more political drama and stuff like that. Which seems fit. We're at the beginning of the book. I'm not expecting anything crazy. I know we'll have the Sandra Lynch at the end of the book, right? So I'm not expecting anything wild, but I was just kind of curious on your thoughts because I'm enjoying it, but it's not like, man, like I can't put the book down right now, you know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I totally see what you're getting at there, Paul. I think that I was expecting, each book we've had has kind of zoomed out like one level. We had Kaladin where we spent a lot of the time, in Kaladin's shoes and, in the heat of battle and carrying bridges and the intensity, very first person sort of thing. Then in Words of Radiance, we stepped back and we got to see, the events happening on, nation versus nation scale. I was fully expecting, and like you said, Paul, this could still very well be the case with the book. I was fully expecting us to go to, okay, now here's Roshar wide happenings and events, and here's things that are going on of, all of these nations participating in. Yeah, we haven't really gotten there yet. It's all been, strategizing and more of the like relationship side of things so far, which, yeah, I'm fully expecting that to pick up. I'm thinking that we're maybe starting with some of the, here's how Shallan's doing, and here's how Adolin's doing, and here's, Kaladin's reunion with his parents, and all of those kind of things, and then lead into, army versus army, all of that kind of stuff. But I agree with you. It's a bit of a slow start, with perhaps the exception of the flashback chapters. Those have been fairly intense, but yeah,
that's true. No, I agree. The flashback chapters have been really exciting. We've seen a lot, and we're still like learning a lot, and seeing a lot of stuff is happening. So it's not bad. It's just like,
yeah,
it's the like dull part at the start of the movie that, you have to go through. Um,
yep.
but I'm sure we'll build into lots of stuff. So
It's almost funny to hear ourselves talking about that we feel this intro is slow when even here right in chapter 9 we have, some murder intrigue, and we've
Yeah.
got,
yeah,
Sadius is dead, Adolin killed him, and now we've got a copycat murder, and Adolin is put on the crime scene and asked to investigate the killer. Like a lot of things where if you kind of like describe it in one sentence, it sounds exciting, but just compared to I think where we maybe came from at the ends of Words of Radiance, it's slow in comparison.
that's true. Coming off the like Sandra Lynch high there at the end
Yeah,
of Words of Radiance, right? Um, so it makes total sense, and it's more of like there's lots of fun stuff, like exciting stuff happening, but the kind of like the overarching
yeah.
problem at hand isn't, oh my gosh, there's this Everstorm. It's, are we gonna get to use the Oath Gates? So it's like a little bit different,
Mhm.
I agree.
which is fine.
I want to talk about irony real quick here because we were in danger of skipping over that. Adolin has just been put in charge of investigating who killed Sadius, and he killed Sadius. So he
Yeah.
do you think? Okay, first of all, where do you guys like, just random predictions? I don't like. You don't need to give this too much thought. Where do you guys think this is going for Adolin? And do you like? How do you think he's gonna approach it? Like, is he gonna break down and tell someone, or is he just gonna make something up and be like, "Oh yeah, this guy killed Sadius," like.
I was actually thinking about this just now, and I don't know how this would play into our story, but it would be kind of amusing, and I don't know, it would be a whole twist if he just tries to be casual and lead a whole investigation, I don't know, maybe interrogate some people, tries to get to the bottom of it, right? Like, where were you at this time, right? And then someone confesses. Like, what is he gonna think? Like, I don't know why it's not gonna happen. I don't think that's gonna happen. But I was just thinking, like, how ridiculous would that be if he like was successful? Like, if he found Thaddeus's killer,
Yeah.
um, and just like, yeah, that was the main reason why I chose irony as my word for this week, because I don't know what Adelin's supposed to do. No clue.
I can see this going one of two ways, perhaps. Maybe Adolin gets gifted someone to blame this on, or maybe it backs him into a tight corner where he's gets forced to confess or whatever this looks like. But yeah, ironic is a good word for it, Paul.
Definitely, he's definitely got a struggle in front of him, and he probably I imagine he doesn't want to be involved, but now he like has to be very involved in the situation, which is no fun. But also, if he's gonna be involved in the situation, this is probably the best way for him, like safest
Yeah.
way. So
I
we'll see what
I wanted to
happens.
ask you, Paul, and I can ask you, Trevor, too, but it probably doesn't do me any good to ask you. Who, just straight up, who do you think is out there doing the copycat murder of the way Adolin took down Sadius?
It's Renar, and he's trying to be like his older brother.
I
Mhm.
I said I wasn't going to ask you. Hush.
Good guess. Good guess, Trevor, but you're totally off,
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
And here's why.
Who is it? Who is it?
Um,
Obviously.
so it's obviously one of the Bridge 4 members. We don't know exactly
Okay.
who yet, but it's looking like it's going to be one of our kind of leading guys. My guess is Teft.
Interesting.
And that is because, we know about Teft. We haven't seen him in a while. He's been kind of off the radar, laying low, right? And I feel like he's got this hidden potential we haven't fully seen to almost be. He's not Moash. He's not as angry as Moash, but he has a little bit of a conniving energy, right? So
I think it's
I
less
think it's
conniving and more just grumpy. Like
true. True. He's kind of like a Zyle. Like he was woken up at the wrong time
Yeah,
and ended up killing
every
someone.
day, all day. He's just on
Yeah.
out of the wrong side of the bed his entire
Exactly.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Someone woke him up, and it was just an unfortunate soul who woke him up. You know. Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be someone that we know, and it's gonna be a shock, but not like a humongous shock. It's not gonna be like Yasna or something. Maybe it is. I don't know. I need to
Yes.
stop. I need to
Yasna's
stop throwing names
assassinating
up
people in
there.
Urithiru
Yeah,
before she shows herself.
exactly. That would be sneaky. I
Okay,
won't lie.
side point. Where is Yasna and when is she getting here?
Good
Any
question.
any answers to this?
My first thought on that is, well, maybe she appeared somewhere crazy and has to walk like a really long distance. I think that's even referred to in the when we see her, because Wit or Hoyd is there and is like, "Why'd you have to appear in the middle of nowhere? Now we got to walk for a week."
Right.
But on the flip side of that, we just learned that she can teleport to places. Like, why is this a problem? Why can't she just do the little disappeary else colory thing and poof, I'm in Urithiru? I'm very confused. I don't know where Yasna is.
That would just make it way too simple and
I guess.
straightforward. So we have to wait for her to walk. Always. Yeah, I mean, she set out to meet with them very beginning of Words of Radiance, and so I expect by the end of Rhythm of War, she'll probably arrive.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's my guess. So a solid three book journey.
3,000 pages
Yeah,
off
exactly.
screen.
Yeah, of just traveling.
Yeah.
Just walking.
Yeah, I think it's legit. But anyways,
There's a Lord of the Rings joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to take it anyway.
there always is. There's always one. So looking into chapter 10, I would kind of like to take it away here for a moment.
All you.
So I mentioned one of my words as eerie, right? And so this chapter had a lot of eerie things. So Kaladin is basically he's arrived at this town. I don't remember which town it is, to be honest, but
Oh.
he's arrived at this town and they've been pillaged basically by the Voidbringers. They came and stole a bunch of wheat and a bunch of food from them, and it's all a mess. So basically, he's kind of investigating. He's just talking to the people there. Fun thing, we get a lot of a lot of funny still moments in this chapter, which I thought was
Yep.
pretty funny, um, and stuff. But there's something that I really wanted to point out because I think this was our first little glimpse at a larger problem that we don't know yet. Okay, um, so I noticed something, and I'll read the quote here in a second, but it kind of goes back a little bit to our Edge Dancer read through,
Okay.
where we see Mr. Kremling Man, right? The guy who's made up of, I don't remember the name for them.
Sleepless.
Sleepless. Okay, I thought it was Ageless or something like that. They're Sleepless, it's someone who's made fully of a million little Kremlings. It's really creepy and weird. But there's a quote in here that says, it's from Kaladin's perspective, and he says, he used a lashing to leap over a snarl of rock buds and vines, and startled a pack of Kremlings as he landed, sending them scuttling away from a nearly clean mink skeleton, probably the leavings of a larger predator. And I just have to say, Mr. Brandon, you're not slick, and I caught it. I'm gonna go ahead and pin this here that this is our little allusion to these sleepless, and that it's maybe a bigger problem than we initially thought, or a bigger scale villain. Just because, like, this was a very offhand comment, but it is very specific, and I think this I caught on to this whenever I was listening, and like instantly was like, I have to note this down. Like, I can't forget this for whenever we talk about this episode. Um, because I feel like this is my first time that I may have caught something that's like, oh, this is rereader value, but I'm a first time reader, so let's go.
I'm proud of you,
I'm going to
Paul.
pat myself on the back for that one. I think this is a little hint, just a little nod to the Sleepless as maybe a bigger problem. Maybe they're more involved with the Voidbringers, or maybe it's a bigger separate problem. That there may be one hanging around here, and obviously just disguised as the bunch of little Kremlings. And so
Just keeping an
I
eye on
don't.
Kaladin or
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
fully know what this entails. There was the one with like following Lift around a bit, and so there's one near Kaladin. So maybe they're kind of stalking all of our Knight Radiant characters, and we just haven't really seen it or haven't really noticed it. So I'm definitely putting a pin in this, and it just very like it felt like if I was watching this on as a movie or a TV show or something, this would be kind of like the eerie little pan away. It's like a skeleton or something. There's something like kind of looming, a looming threat, and so I'm gonna leave that there. I was curious to see if y'all noticed that also, because this whole thing is like, oh, the Void Bringers, all this stuff, and then it kind of like it's simply just a tiny little nod or pin, and it could be something minor still, but I'm pretty convinced this is gonna be it's alluding to a bigger thing. So once again, you're not slick, Brandon.
I I gotta admit, I did not notice this at all. As you're reading that, I'm flipping through the pages like, is this actually in the chapter? Sure enough, it is. It's right there. I was so focused on the like Sill dialogue that's going on at the time that I didn't even pause for the what I just thought was the environmental or whatever. Here's the setting that he's at,
Yeah.
the context there. But I yeah, I don't know. I mean, there he says it right there. Probably the leavings of a larger predator. I mean, maybe that's the author giving us the understatement of the year of
Yeah.
it's the leavings of the most ominous predator that exists on Roshar. Yeah, you might have something.
I'm hoping so. This will be my big success as a
I
attentive first time reader, a big win.
Trevor's of course not going to spill anything here for us, but
Well, I'm about
I
to say something, but it's not what you want to hear.
Okay.
but before you say whatever you're going to say, I'm a little worried for your theory, Paul, for no other reason than I could see this being like something that goes unconfirmed like indefinitely. Like this could
Yeah,
be a little
could
Easter
be.
egg of, oh, that was a sleepless, laying there watching Kaladin following him around, but maybe this is something that like never gets revisited, and this just has to be like your theory you hold on to for a while that we'll never know if this was a sleepless or not.
Yeah, like you finish the book and you're like, wow, great story.
Oh,
But
where
what
was
about
the
the sleep? Like,
sleepless?
where were the sleepless? Like, what was going on there? That would be very cruel. So we're hoping not for that.
All right. Just a minor side note here, which it's relatively applicable, but it's not what you're bringing up, but it's still in this quote. So, do you remember what chickens are on Roshar? It's
They're in Shinovar, right?
it's basically
Yes.
anything that flies is a chicken. So anything with
Yeah.
feathers, they call it chicken. So um, similar here. Anything with 4 legs and with fur is called a mink, and that can range anything from a rat to a fox to like a dog. They're all minks to the people of Roshar. So it's anything with 4 legs and fur is referred to as a mink. So if you have an ebook of any of these books and hit control F and look for mink, you'll actually find a lot because it's used to describe quite a bit. So the word mink is used quite a bit here, and so a mink skeleton could just mean anything from anything from a rodent to a cat. So
True. I will say the first time that I heard this, I missed the mink part, and I thought it was just a human skeleton. And I was like, whoa, like huge. That I think that makes it a lot bigger of a implication there. Um, and that was instantly why I thought it was a sleepless spying. I thought maybe the sleepless had a skeleton and he just sent all of his crumblings off or whatever. I wasn't quite sure on that. But yeah, the fact it is a mink skeleton, kind of whatever, but still seems eerie enough to put a pin in and watch out for.
the fact that it's not a human skeleton doesn't disprove your theory by any means, Paul, because they can take any
That's
form they
true.
want. And especially if you've read Mistborn, for any of our listeners, like the context there is a little grander, but I know that's not what you meant because you haven't finished that book, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm. True. I'm actually not too far on the first Mistborn book, so
Alrighty. Kaladin is hunting Voidbringers. They attacked a grain store and ran off with all the food. And all the Alethi who noticed them mentioned red lights. They weren't sure if it was their eyes or Spren or what, but they all mentioned something red that was happening. So there's that. But they're not deliberately attacking Alethi like the mindless nightmares of old that they've all been preached about for years and years. So what were your guys' reactions to our Voidbringers attacking a grain storage?
It seems to be becoming clear that not only are the Voidbringers, the awakened Parshmen, not like just wantonly attacking humans, they seem to be almost going out of their way not to kill humans. They attack, in quotes, this town, but really all they do is injure two of the people that were guarding the food store and then steal all the food and run away. Like no one even actually died in the attack that they made. And so this is, yeah, seems to be very much pointing down the road of these Parshmen, the Voidbringers, at least at this point, don't seem to be out for like full on war.
Which I did think was interesting. I thought that was kind of a funny. Because I mean, I've been under the assumption that whenever they go somewhere, they're just gonna kill everyone that they can. And I figured that's kind of the motivation from everything else we've seen. So I was a little surprised that they would just take food, but I mean, I guess they were hungry. They wanted to get back and eat some, but I was a little surprised, and it makes me curious. Like, what if this somehow was something different, or I don't know. I don't know how fully like bloodthirsty all of our Voidbringers are. I guess. Um,
I'm I'm kind of going down some trains of thought similar of I wonder, and this is totally just me theorizing at this point. What if like the Parshmen are awaking, but they're just as confused about what's going on as everyone else? What if they're like, oh, whoa, I now understand way more than I thought. I can think clearer. I'm no longer in dull form, but what's going on? Who just awakened me? I'm kind of hungry, guys. You want to go grab that grain over there and we'll go back to our camp in the mountains? Like maybe they're just as in the dark as our human characters are, perhaps.
Good guesses. Any comments for our young ardent girl who's flirting with Kaladin? Do we care? Sil cares, but does anybody else care?
Sil was very funny about it. I don't imagine that the character will become any notable character, but it was just a funny scene. Um, that she kind of like flirts with Kaladin, and then Sil is like, she thinks you're pretty, talking about Kaladin,
Yeah.
um, and stuff.
And
So
even better, she's like, "Oh man, she must be desperate. You look terrible."
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Talking about his hair looks really bad and stuff. That was really funny. I think this was one of my favorite chapters that we read this week because we had a lot of funny Sil moments. Um, and also I think the part at the end with Renarin was super cool. Like I thought it was just really neat. So that's why it was definitely one of my favorites.
Since you mentioned Sil quotes, I actually wanted to read one real quick, just because I thought it was great. It was another good Sil moment. This is towards the beginning of their kind of banter, and she says this: "It is my solemn and important duty to bring happiness, light, and joy into your world when you're being a dour idiot," which is most of the time. So there. I was like, that's just like everything about Sil in one sentence is perfect.
That's true. That's a good summary. A very clear summary. Yeah. It really kind of felt overdue. We haven't had like a good Sil chapter in a long time. This felt like Sil's chapter, honestly. Um, Also, there's some funny moments about like what would you think if we like threw your like sister around by her ankles or whatever, talking about how they use shard blades and swing them around and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Um, it was pretty great.
Well, not just
So
shard blades, just any utensil, any
yeah,
sword. Like,
anything.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And then we had to leave Syl and Kaladin for the second half of this chapter and go back to poor Adolin, who's struggling with the weight of everything that he's dealing with. But Renarin's kind of got his back. Renarin kind of does the little, cheer up, brother. It's not so bad thing. At least that was kind of where that's kind of the vibe I got from this little scene with them.
He has a really good suggestion of asking Shallan to draw Sureblood as like a tribute for him, because Adolin is feeling depressed, and seeing Gallant as a poor substitute for Sureblood, his lifelong horse buddy. So
And I was glad of this reminder because I had honestly completely forgot that Adolin's horse died in the battle. And this moment where he's kind of reminiscing about the relationship he had with him and how literally priceless a Rashadium horse is because they choose their riders. It's not like,
right.
You can't just there is no sum of money that can just go buy you a Rashadium. You have to earn that relationship and build it, and he had that with his horse, and we honestly didn't see too much of that. We saw a little bit of it, I think, but this was a good reminder that that's another thing weighing on Adolin right now is the loss of his horse that he was fairly close to.
In one of our Dalinar flashback chapters recently, Dalinar has this offhand comment of Rashadium being the third shard of plate, blade, and mount, but he even values the Rashadium above the other two because you're right, you can't buy it. Like, there is a price on a shard blade, there is a price on shard plate. At some point you can buy them. You cannot buy a Rashadium. A Rashadium has to choose you. So there's a very special relationship there that Adolin is missing.
Renarin drops some bits of information though here in this chapter. He reveals, and I think he even shows Adolin, doesn't he? His shard blade,
Yeah, he does.
his radiant spren blade, not the dead shard blade that Adolin had won for him, but his true radiant blade, which is cool and quick, I think. It seems like Kaladin and Shallan took a really long time to get to that point. Although Shallan not so much, perhaps. She seems to have wielded her blade quite early on. But Kaladin certainly took a very long time to get to that level. And here is Renarin relatively shortly after he seems to have become a radiant. And here he is with the blades. So he's moving along pretty quick.
Well, it's just because Renara hasn't been on screen. If you think back to
Fair.
Words of Radiance, he was the one seeing the foreshadowing, the Everstorm, and writing on the walls for the whole book. So he's been having a journey for himself. We just haven't seen it. So
He's just so secretive. I like
yeah,
all through all of Words of Radiance, I was like, I like Renarin. He's the earnest, overlooked younger brother who's just trying to do his best. Now I'm like going back and questioning a lot of that. Like, hang on a second, pal. What secrets were you holding this entire time and not telling anyone? Like, dude.
Yeah, don't be like Renarin, Trevor. Come on.
at least
All
Renarin
his
has the
secrets.
at least Renarin has the decency to write on the walls eerie messages to his dad. I don't even do that for you guys. I just laugh at you.
Yeah.
We're gonna start
Honestly.
looking closely in the background of your camera shot there for
Yeah, see if we can
notes
read
written on the wall.
the writing on the wall.
Yes,
Yeah.
my Kaladin posters changed 8 degrees. Okay, what does that mean? 8.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Yep. But then Renarin also heals Adolin's. I guess his wrist is injured at this point, and so he shows off some more of his powers and heals him right there on the spot. So yeah, Renarin is like full blown radiant at this point. It seems.
Isn't that like I remember that kind of being like a not on purpose thing. Like he just talks to Adolin and I don't know, maybe touches his arm or something, and then it kind of heals. But I
Yeah.
don't remember it being like like let me see your arm and heal it or whatever. Do you remember the exact like way that it happens?
Well,
go ahead, Elliot.
actually, now that you say that, I think I skipped over perhaps the most important part there. Renarin goes and grabs like Adolin's arm or a wrist or something like that and gives him a vision. And Adolin sees this vision of like the perfect version of himself or like Adolin perfected. And like after that, Renarin lets go of him, and then it's just after the fact, Adolin's like, oh, and my wrist is healed too. So yeah, I think you're right, Paul. It was perhaps like an unintentional consequence of Renarin like sharing that vision with Adolin, which is perhaps another glimpse at the powers that Renarin apparently has.
Do you guys remember where we've seen this before or something similar to this before?
Was it Dalinar's vision with the knight's essence or whatever? That's what I always think of whenever I think of healing and
Oh, well,
knight's
yes,
radiance.
the healing, but I was thinking of the other one where Renarin gives Adolin a vision. If you guys remember back to the beginning of Words of Radiance, Shallan inspires her thug employee guys with drawings of them and what they could be, of like, this is you as an ideal soldier, this is what you could be if you lived up to this, and it inspires them to go save the other caravan that they run into. I don't know if you guys remember parts of that Words of Radiance.
That's true. I do remember that.
So there's an interesting parallel there between what Renard just did and what Shallan's done for some other people.
I'm gonna have to think on that more, actually, because that was one of my big takeaways, one of my big themes from like early Words of Radiance was Shallan's actions there of inspiring those around her by depicting them as what they could be. I had not thought about the parallel to what Renara just did here. That's I have to go think about that. That's cool.
Just one other Syl moment that I remembered before we move on.
Yeah, go.
So Syl makes a lot of high audacity statements in this chapter, and I don't even remember how the conversation really goes, but I just remember Kaladin asking, like, can Spren have kids? And she just goes, it's very funny in the audiobook, she's like, baby Spren?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know about that or something, and I don't even remember what else she says about that, but she just like talks a little bit about baby Spren, and I thought that was just really funny. Like there really is a Spren for everything and stuff, and
you're bringing that back to my mind, and I thought that section was hilarious too, because then Syl says something essentially along the lines of, "Oh, I'd be a fantastic mother," and Khan's like,
exactly.
"No, you wouldn't. You'd be
Yeah.
terrible. You'd get distracted by a bug crawling across the ground and completely forget about them," which is totally true. She would.
Yeah, that's true.
On that note, we get to talk about chapter 11 now. We get to...
True. Good segue.
Yeah. So, Eliot, I kind of want to throw this to you for a little bit and pick your brain about... You've said that Dalinar is your favorite character up until Oathbringer, but through the Wave Kings, through Words of Radiance, and he's certainly my second favorite character. I've said on this podcast that he's my favorite before, but I misspoke. Kaladin's always my favorite. But Dalinar is a close second. I really, really enjoy his character. But we're getting some very graphic and what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody give me a word.
The word kind of coming to me is dark.
Okay. Dark flashback chapters of Dalinar and who he used to be. So I'll throw this to you to get your thoughts on this for your favorite character.
It's not the same dark as like some of the Shallan flashback chapters that we got. You know, those were like creepy, make your skin crawl dark. These are more of like make you wince or make you kind of cringe dark. It's different. But yeah, this flashback chapter 11 specifically, is very much not the Dalinar that I hold up as my favorite character. And it's very interesting because it tells you just how far Dalinar has come, and these chapters are doing quite a bit to explain the reactions that we've seen so many other characters give Dalinar that haven't made so much sense to us as readers, at least as a first time reader. You know, all I've seen up to this point is a very honorable Dalinar. All I've seen up to this point is a very leadership oriented, very I'm going to do the right thing even when no one else is Dalinar. Everyone else looks at that Dalinar and says, who the heck are you? Where's the real Dalinar? And now we're seeing why everyone is giving him that deer in the headlights look of what do you mean you want us to follow the codes? You're the Blackthorn, right?
Right.
Well, this is what his reputation is built on, and it's rather brutal. And I want to talk a little bit about the thrill, and I want to get you guys' thoughts. And Trevor, whatever you're willing to share on the thrill, because the impression I get from this version of Dalinar, it's almost like he's addicted to the thrill. Like that's all he lives for are those moments in battle when he gets to feel like he's king of the world, and then the times in between are just like the low points where he's waiting for his next fix. Like that's all he cares about is, call me up when there's a battle so I can feel that adrenaline rush. Like that's the that's the vision I'm getting of Dalinar here. I don't what did you think, Paul, about the thrill in this chapter?
I must say, in general, I feel like I haven't put that much thought into the thrill. I've kind of just assumed it's this toxic trait that he had, and he kind of got sick of as he got older, as we kind of saw throughout the Way of Kings and Words of Radiance and all. And I haven't thought of it that much as its own thing. Just kind of like I don't know. He was a headstrong young man, I guess. But the more that it's coming up, especially in these flashback chapters, it seems like it might be something else. That it may be something else that I haven't really put thought into. That it could be a whole lot more than meets the eye. And I'm not 100% sure what to make of it. I'm still kind of like, just being honest, I'm in the camp of it's not anything deep. But the more we see it, the more I consider, like, is there something going on behind this? Is there something much deeper here? And it seems like there is. At a minimum, he is like addicted to it or like infatuated with it, and it's like kind of what consumes him as a person, which is a big deal. Like, whether or not the thrill is like some magical force or anything like that, it's at least affected him a whole lot. I honestly think it may be kind of an equivalent to how we see, or a comparison maybe, of how we see Kaladin struggle with depression and stuff. Like, whereas, it's a big deal, but it's not like a magic force placed against him, I guess. Maybe it's just kind of like something he's wrestled with and he like struggles with internally. That's not necessarily the cause of something else. That's kind of the way I've thought of it.
So, two things. You guys have the first one is you guys have very different reactions to this, and it's because of the medium that you're consuming this book. Paul, you're doing audiobook, and you can't see the capitalization of the word. Eliot, back in the Way of Kings, you specifically mentioned the thrill, and Paul, I remember your reaction was like, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" I don't even remember like what that means, the thrill, because as you're reading it, it just sounds like something that's, it doesn't really sound like anything
The
special.
thrill of battle.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're reading it, it's capitalized. And it's almost as if it's a name or like it's a place or something, like a state of mind. So Eliot, you're giving this way more weight than Paul is, and that's why, because you've seen the capital letter every time. The second thing, we're in chapter 11 now of Oathbringer, and I'm fairly certain we've seen the thrill mentioned more times in this book so far than we have in The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance combined. The Way of Kings mentions it about 5 or 6 times total. And like you get a couple brief mentions of it on the Shattered Plains. Statius and Dalinar have a conversation about it in The Way of Kings. There are 2 mentions of it, I'm fairly certain, in Words of Radiance. It's hardly mentioned at all in Words of Radiance, but that's just because Dalinar's not fighting anything. So you don't really have any mentions of it. So far in this book, we've had, like, in every Dalinar flashback chapter, he's mentioned it. And in a couple of the modern day Dalinar chapters, he's mentioned it, and that, like, oh, I don't feel it anymore, that type of thing. So we're getting a lot more the thrill than we have. So I'm glad you guys are keying into that, Eliot. So throw it back to you.
The thrill spren, yeah.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. It does seem like it's pointing towards perhaps this is going to be an important element of Dalinar's character. And before it almost seemed like you were saying, Paul, that perhaps this was part of Dalinar's character before, and it just kind of wore off. He got old. He doesn't feel that adrenaline as much as he did before. But I think, yeah, from these intro chapters, it seems like there is more emphasis being placed on this. Maybe this is going to be a more key element of Dalinar's journey and his character. Of is this something that he has to overcome? I actually really liked your comparison there, Paul, to Kaladin's depression. Is this an inner demon that he has to fight, sort of thing? That's an interesting way of thinking about it, for sure. But as this chapter continues on, we see the origin of where Dalinar gets his shard blade, Oathbringer, which I was definitely looking for that origin story, figuring out where he got that. It came from a much more evil moment. I'll even use the word evil there, of method that he acquired it. He was chasing down this other, was it another high prince? Was that even a term for this? Is that the right? I don't even.
He's not. I think he is. Yeah, he's one of the high princes of
Yeah,
Alethkar, and he's resisting Gavilar's rule, so he's chasing
right.
him.
So chasing him, doing battle with him, but it ends with this very dark scene of he's chased him into his hideout. Essentially, he's on his deathbed, and here is that high prince's 6-year-old son, who has picked up his father's shard blade and is trying to stand up against Dalinar and protect his dying father. And it thankfully happens off camera, but Dalinar very clearly murders that 6-year-old boy and takes the shard blade. So a very blood stained origin of this sword.
You mentioned that it happens off screen. So did he really kill the 6-year-old boy? Could it have not happened that way? Do you know?
That's a good question. And that is a good question. And maybe I'm jumping to a bit of a conclusion. I think the reason why I'm going to jump to that conclusion is because of Dalinar's guard, Kadash, because of his reaction.
Yep.
We already saw a conversation between Dalinar and Kadash at Dalinar's wedding with Navani, where Kadash said, "I can no longer trust you because I remember the rift." And the title of this chapter, I'm pretty sure, is
Is the
The
rift.
Rift. And
Yep.
like this is the moment that he's referring to. And there's even a scene where that says like Kadash, walked out of that room. Kadash saw whatever it was that Dalinar did. And so you're right. It happened off screen. It could be slightly or maybe intentionally by our author here misleading us, but I'm going off of Kadash's reaction to say that I think Dalinar killed them all. I think he killed everyone in that room.
You're telling me that that kid isn't Adolin or someone, and he just brought the kid with him.
It's
Possible, I
possible.
suppose.
I think that's what happened. I'm gonna
What a
stick with
twist.
that. Yeah.
So, just a quick shout out to Kadash. He's not a main character by any means, but we've seen him a couple times now, and he doesn't even have dialogue in this chapter. He's one of Gavilar's bodyguards, and he walks up to Dalinar after he's all forlorn after this and feeling empty after this. Like Dalinar just won his first shard blade, and he's sitting on the side of the rift feeling terrible after what and empty, and having this boy's cries in the back of his mind like echoing. And we'll talk about what that means here in a second, but Kadash is kind of Dalinar's tie to his past in the present day right now. Of Kadash was there on the battlefield with Dalinar. Everybody else is dead in present day. Gavilar is dead. Sadeas is dead. Like, there's probably a couple of his captains that are still around, or were around at this time, but pretty much everybody is dead except for Kadash, who's one of his captains. And Kadash is going to be one of those ties back to his early adult years, where he had absolutely no self-control on the battlefield, and that's going to have some consequences. There's a throwaway line at the end of that chapter too, where it says Sadeas is irate that he didn't get the shard blade, because Sadeas is a bowman and he was trying to take the High Prince down himself with his bow, and he didn't get to him. So he's really upset that Dalinar got the blade. And Sadeas did eventually get the blade, we know, because it's the same sword that Dalinar gives up for Kaladin and his men. So that gives that scene a little bit more context of Dalinar knows exactly what Sadeas would do to give up, or what Sadeas would give up to get that shard blade, because he's had it since his youth right in front of Sadeas.
And I hadn't actually thought about this in this light. In Way of Kings, when we see Sadeas, he doesn't have a shard blade, right?
Correct.
So
He never got one.
Sadeas, I guess I had just reading this one kind of assumed that they're part of this juggernaut army. Well, obviously Sadeas is going to go get another one in the next couple of battles, but apparently he doesn't. We get all the way to Way of Kings and he still doesn't have a shard blade, and yeah, that's like 25 years later or more or something like that. So yeah, that's 25 years of Sadeas watching Dalinar wield that blade, just coveting it and wanting it. That you're right, Trevor. That does put that scene where Dalinar offers up that blade in exchange for the bridgeman. Like, Sadeas just can't refuse that, can he? He has
Right.
to have that blade. Interesting. I I wanted to mention in this that I noticed in this chapter that Oathbringer has some interesting history that I was not expecting. They reveal here that Oathbringer was the original sword of the Sunmaker. And the Sunmaker, I think, is one of my like random name drops that I noted in my long list of questions. Maybe as far back as Way of Kings. I don't remember. It might have been my Words of Radiance list, but we haven't heard anything about who this Sunmaker was aside from a name drop, thousands of pages ago. But now I think he's been mentioned a couple times already now in Oathbringer. So I'm starting to see, and we're getting to learn a little bit more that the Sunmaker was the original like conqueror of Alethkar. At least that's I think the hint we got a little earlier. And so now I'm wondering, is there going to be some sort of parallel history of, Dalinar, the conqueror and uniter of Alethkar, and Sunmaker, the original like conqueror and uniter of Alethkar, and this sword that ties the two of them together? Maybe, perhaps.
Are there any predictions on Oathbringer the book somewhere? Where does that shard blade get its name? Because obviously that sword has been around since the Sunmaker, and which was a while ago. So all of our excerpts have been from Oathbringer. I don't know if you guys have picked that up, but our preface,
The epigraph.
epigraph, thank you, of each chapter. Notably, there are no epigraphs on flashback chapters. I don't know if you guys have picked up on that through our books, but there are never epigraphs on flashback chapters, but they're all on present day chapters. But all of our epigraphs have been excerpts from the preface of Oathbringer. So
Yep, I did notice that, and I'm wondering. My only guess there is perhaps I've actually two guesses. Well, no, my second one doesn't make sense. I think perhaps the Sunmaker is the author of Oathbringer. That it's a book written down by him, or I suppose her at this point. I don't know if we've confirmed that one, but that's my guess.
That was kind of what I was thinking. Just kind of the correlation there. Sunmaker having Oathbringer and in the book titled Oathbringer, like, wouldn't it be
Yeah.
about Sunmaker? Maybe, like, that's a pretty logical step.
Can I read those epigraphs in order from our chapters so far? Just real quick.
Sure.
So it starts at chapter 1, but I'll just read it as if there's no breaks. I'm certain some will feel threatened by this record. Some few may feel liberated. Most will simply feel that it should not exist. I needed to write it anyway. I know that many women who read this will see it only as further proof that I am the godless heretic everyone claims. I can point to the moment when I decided for certain this record had to be written. I hung between realms, seeing into Shadesmar, the realm of the Spren, and beyond. I thought that I was surely dead. Certainly, some who saw farther than I did thought I had fallen. I did not die. I experienced something worse. The moment notwithstanding, I can honestly say this book had been brewing in me since my youth. The sum of my experiences has pointed at this moment, this decision. Perhaps my heresy stretches back to those days in my childhood where these ideals began. And that's as far as we are at so far.
It definitely sounds like Yasna. The whole
Yasna?
thing just sounds like Yasna. Like, the heretic between realms,
Oh, yeah, you're
all
right.
this stuff. Like, it's literally, it just screams Yasna at me.
It also, to me, sounds like Dalinar, and this is kind of where I was like going with my second theory that doesn't make any sense. It almost seems like it's a in the future Dalinar. It's like as if Dalinar 10 years from now is writing about his time back as a heretic, and we obviously haven't seen him go to Shadesmar or anything like that yet, but that obviously doesn't make sense. Maybe it would. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess if it's happened, we haven't really seen it. Maybe you could count his visions as something along those lines.
Just a reminder, Dalinar can't write. You know that, right? Like Dalinar, like
Well,
he
sure.
he could dictate it, but
That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
yeah, okay.
That's kind of the general assumption.
But I think it makes more sense that it would be the Sunmaker. And I do like that parallel to Yasna. That actually is interesting.
I that is a good point, actually, Paul. I didn't think about the Shadesmar part of it, but
I'm also have my eyes open for our good friend Noadon, of course. He has yet to make an appearance that we've noticed so far in Oathbringer, but this being Dalinar's book, I really want to see him again. And I'm assuming we will at some point, but I haven't seen him yet.
That'd be cool. I kind of forgot about him. Yeah.
how could you forget
namesake.
about him? I say his name every week.
I don't know. I just forgot. That is all.
Any further?
I wanted to.
Yeah, go.
Yes, I wanted to actually one last thought to kind of wrap us up, and Paul, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, perhaps, as I'm going to mention one of your top tier characters. The end of this chapter, Dalinar kind of closes out with just this, like, he can't get rid of the voice of that crying boy in his head, and I immediately thought of Zeth and the scenes we saw of Zeth. Like, every time he closes his eyes, he hears the screams of all the people he's killed, and I was just like, oh man, that was a Zeth moment for Dalinar there. Paul, did you think about that at all, or am I drawing interesting parallels, or do I need to stop comparing Dalinar to your favorite?
No. That's a really good parallel. I'm glad you asked. I didn't actually think about that when reading it, but when you bring it up, it does make a lot of sense. I feel like it's just showcasing like remorseful fights or remorseful kills. Every time Zeth closes his eyes, he hears those screams, and it's people that he claims he didn't want to kill, or wished he hadn't, or wished he wouldn't have had to. And I imagine that's what's going on with Dalinar here. Dalinar gets carried away by the thrill in these fights, and in battle, it's not like you feel you stop to really mourn your enemies' deaths, I guess. But I'm imagining with the depiction of the child and stuff that maybe he was haunted by that, and so that would kind of make sense of just kind of like a fight or a time where they killed that they feel an immense amount of guilt, and they can't quite get it out of their head there. So that's kind of what I think of with that parallel, and I think that's a reasonable parallel there. I feel like there's no like bigger significance than that. Just kind of showcasing the like how deeply that affected them, I guess.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense.
Any further thoughts on episode 58?
None right now. I thought this was a fun series of chapters to talk about, and I'm excited to get to next week's.
Cool. Well, let's close this episode and read further. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
You got it.
Always.